very much as we've seen in 2024, in the last 4 years, God has a way of working through horrible situations and horrible circumstances. We're going to bring a story that's a little bit more personalized that really brings that to the fore with a friend of mine who was there on January 6th and the things that he's gone through with going to federal prison, and just show you the way that God can work through what would be seemingly hopeless circumstances to bring about an incredible story. And we think you're really going to enjoy it, coming up on 1819 News, the podcast. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. We are definitely in pursuit of that, and that word free has extra special meaning to someone in the studio. Well, I guess to a couple people, because we've both been there, but that's neither here nor there. As I'm going to be bringing on a new friend of mine, Kaleb Dillard, who was a J6er, one of the horrible insurrectionist domestic terrorists that made the mistake of going to Washington, D.C. Anyway, bringing him on to hear his truly incredible story, everything that he went through. We're going to really dig into the details of what happened in D.C., but specifically kind of how God brought him together with his wife through the process and being sentenced and going to prison, crazy prison stories. One of my favorite things to do is just sit around and talk about prison stories. I don't get to do that very often, so going to get to do that today. Really just hear this story and what I would consider a travesty in the American justice system, as well as the other problems that we have going on in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. All of that and more coming up today on 1819 News, the podcast. And not only is Kaleb here, but so is Anna. I'm going to go ahead and welcome them in, and then I'll go into the thing where I sell you stuff. You guys good? Okay. All right. So Kaleb, Anna, thank you guys so much for taking the time to come and join us.
Yeah, thank you.
We're
really
so
humbled
excited.
to be here.
Yeah. And I'm the similarities in our stories or whatever is just really incredible. And so I'm honored that you guys are here. You know, we talked before you went to prison, and then now you're out, and I'm glad you're out, and we get to do this now. So this is good.
Me too.
Better to be on this side of the prison sentence, I always say. So anyway, well, the one thing I want to tell you, I don't even know if I want to tell you this anymore, because I've been trying to build up my YouTube page again, because I was unceremoniously church disciplined off of it previously back in the COVID regime days. And we figured out a way to get back on, and I thought, okay, they're done censoring. They learned their lesson, YouTube. And then they canceled my last episode again. And I got PTSD of watching YouTube cancel like really good episodes of my podcast, and just felt singed by it. But I all that being said, I still need you to go and subscribe to my YouTube page so I can get those numbers up. We're going to run a test today and see if January 6th gets episodes kicked off. I think we're okay, but you know, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But go to YouTube and subscribe there. And if this episode's not there, you won't hear me talking about it. Go to some other podcasting platform to get it. But anyway, in order for us to do what we need to do with the podcast, we do feel that YouTube is the best place to get video podcasting out. We obviously invest in a lot into video podcasts. So please go there, subscribe, like, comment, share, all of the things so that we can get our message out to many more people, and we can get Kaleb and Anna's story out to as many people as possible. Help us to do that. But now we're going to go into the actual story. So here we are.
Yeah.
I almost want to, take bets on whether we're going to get kicked off or not. But you made it through Andrew McLean's podcast, and that didn't get kicked off, and that was on YouTube.
Yeah. I think they said it censors it in the sense of
demonetization.
Yeah. It doesn't push the algorithm or anything like that if you're talking about Gen 6. So the numbers stay down, but I don't believe it's been removed. So
no, I was watching it on the way up here. I was trying to watch it on the way up to Birmingham today, and I kept getting phone calls. So
yeah.
Well, here it is, Adrian. That's my producer. We're crossing our fingers.
Yeah.
We're praying to God.
Right.
Anyway, so whatever. My philosophy that has gotten me this far is just tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may.
Amen.
So that's how we got here. Well, on that note, real quick, Kaleb, I'm going to start with you. I want to just kind of get your bio. Obviously, you were addicted to drugs and harming people and stabbing people consistently and committing all kinds of violent crimes, and it finally caught up with you. Is that it?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That was that wasn't saying enough, really. Yeah. No, it's kind of like that. So I grew up here in Birmingham. I went to Briarwood Christian High School.
Rough place.
Yeah, really, really rough place. That's where I learned my violence.
Yeah.
Wonderful school, honestly. Nothing but good things to say about Briarwood. Yeah. Loved my time there. Graduated, went into the Marine Corps for 5 years. I got out of the Marine Corps, came and attended Stanford University, another place riddled with violence, where I majored in finance and I cheered. Yeah. And then I graduated, worked for a year, and that was when I got sentenced to prison. So
there it is.
Yeah.
So obviously, I say in jest, bringing that out. So you had a very normal childhood.
Yes.
Grew up probably with great parents. Your dad's a dentist, I think. Okay. Yeah. So dad's a dentist, grew up in a normal family, went to Briarwood Christian, not normally the people that you slam in prison. I, on the other hand, am the exact opposite of that and deserved every day that I did in prison and probably more. So that's where our stories separate.
Right. But
there is a lot of commonalities we'll get into. So I led with that question because I want people to see how ridiculous the way that they handled J6 was. You probably could have shot someone, just not there. So like went somewhere else and shot someone, and they would have been like, "Oh, you went to Briarwood Christian School and you've got great parents, probation."
Right. Yeah.
Right. But you did the unthinkable and went to the Capitol when, anyway. So I want to get a feel for who you are, how you grew up, and so that puts kind of the contrast on display. You're not a lifelong criminal. That's not the case. And so I think that's important to bring out. Let's go then to January 5th, maybe. When did you go to DC? Tell us about, getting there, going to the Capitol. What was your intentions? Why did you go there?
Yeah. So I was on Christmas break at Stanford, and we still had the extended Christmas break at that time. So we didn't go back till mid-January or later than that, maybe in the 20s. But I was on Christmas break. My dad came to me and was like, "Hey, I got to work, but Trump's having this rally, and I'll pay for your gas, I'll pay for your lodging, if you want to go and go to this rally." And I was like, "You don't got to do any of that. I got, I had a lot of friends up there. I lived, so I was stationed in Quantico, right outside of DC for 4 out of the 5 years that I was in the Marine Corps. So had a lot of church friends and people up there. I was like, I'll go see some buddies and go to the rally and something to do on my Christmas break. Yeah. I was not on the "this thing has been stolen" train really at that point. And it's funny, I mean, now some of my views have changed on that, but at the time, I had just been living in Northern Virginia for 4 years. And so I was surrounded by liberal people, and I wasn't quite as maybe optimistic for, there's just no way that many people could vote for Joe Biden. In my mind, I was like, I don't know. I know a lot of people that love him, but that's, have that mindset. And so I went up there and met up with some friends and, I spent the night with a buddy and attended the rally the next day. And that's obviously when things got crazy in my life. Well, maybe didn't change there, but had set in motion the thing that would change my life there. Yeah. Yeah.
But you're saying them throwing you in prison changed your mind on the election being stolen?
No. A couple of things. Dinesh D'Souza has a good documentary on it.
Which one?
The something Mules,
2000 Mules.
Yeah, 2000 Mules. Yeah. That was definitely pretty eye-opening. And then I think, honestly, the most recent election has opened a lot of people's eyes. But, to see this, Obama, 2012, 60-so-odd million votes. Hillary Clinton, 2016, 60-so-odd million votes. Joe Biden, 80 million votes. Yeah. Kamala Harris, 60-so-odd million votes. To me, that just, I think people are opening their eyes to like, man, maybe there was something to this mail-in ballot thing and ballot harvesting and things like that.
Yeah. I was from the moment that Fox News called Arizona the night of the election, I knew that it was being rigged. And then when I woke up the next morning and watched the that. So I was on that train from the very beginning. I've said from the very beginning that I believe the election was stolen. And because I believe the election was stolen is the reason I stopped focusing on national politics and started a statewide news outlet rather than trying to fix DC and the national political media realm that I was in before. I said, let's try and fix our state. And it was literally because I believe the election was stolen. So interestingly enough, but whatever.
Wow. No, that's cool.
So you're in DC. You're at the Capitol, or not at the Capitol. Where was the initial?
Yeah, the rally, was in between the Washington Monument and the World War II Memorial. Okay. The large lawn in between those two memorials. And in the crowd, listening to the speeches, I don't know exactly the time I got there, but we had been there for a couple of hours, maybe a few hours before we, people were saying we're going to all march down to the Capitol. So we stayed through Trump's speech. And then after Trump spoke, that's when most people, there were still speakers after that, but that's when most people started walking down. And that's when me and my buddies decided to go get something to eat because we were really hungry. And so there had been people talking in the crowd about going to the Capitol. Nobody talked about going inside. Nobody, I say all this just to say that the crowd was not full of people that we were thinking, this is going to get crazy in a few hours here, I mean, not to say there weren't some crazy people. Like there are people you talk to that you're like, wow, yeah, you seem totally reasonable. And then they're like, and then there's a perfect triangle that connects Disneyland to the Bermuda Triangle to this other island. And that's where they're keeping all the, you know what I mean? There were people like that, obviously, that you're like, okay, I don't know if I don't subscribe to that. But for the most part, everybody there was just good American people, that love the Lord. They were very prayerful. People were very optimistic that day that this is our last hope to really stop this stolen election, and you don't have to be fully on that train to be in that crowd and to say, I'm with people that I think really love this country and love the Lord. And this is a unique environment that I felt at home in, and so when we go to grab something to eat. And it's an important piece of the story because where we traveled was like north. So everybody was going straight, east to the Capitol. Well, we went north to eat. And then when we came back, we ended up on the backside of the Capitol building where there was, so you see a lot of these videos of all the violence at the front where all the scaffolding is. That's kind of the west facing entrance where they had been doing a lot of construction, and you see cops and people fighting and all this stuff. And we just didn't witness any of that. I came right up to a police line, was talking to an officer safely 30 yards away from the actual Capitol building. Yeah. And I'm thinking, this is a good spot. We're here to make our voices heard, and this is great. And next thing you know, the cops just start backing up. And I got a crowd building behind me, pushing me forward. And, they're like, get up there. And I'm kind of like, oh, okay, and and I'm still having this conversation with this cop. And I don't know why they're, presumably somebody's broken the police line somewhere down the line that I'm not seeing, and they're consolidating. I'm not saying that they were all purposely letting us into the building. I'm just saying that for whatever reason, we make it to where I am crammed up against the back door of the East Rotunda, entrance. And it's just a massive crowd now built behind me, pushing, sorry, I'm hitting you in the face, pushing me up against the wall of the Capitol. And I've stayed like that for, several minutes. I don't know how long exactly. But at that time, I'm looking in the window and I'm waving at the reporters on the inside, and I'm kind of being funny and just being casual, and then the officer looks at me and he's like, you need to get out of here. It's about to get bad. And I was like, dude, I don't know where you want me to go. We're both crammed here up against this wall. And next thing you know, it was just like boom, boom, boom. And all these tear gas grenades start going off, and people just start going crazy. It turns into a mosh pit. And under those circumstances, things just completely change. And, I'm not by any means saying I was doing something that I should have been doing, but desperate times, it's kind of like the whole mood, the whole atmosphere shifted in that moment when the gas started festering and staying there, and people are screaming and I'm like, man, I've got to fight my way out of the back of this crowd and try to go move my way out of the back of the crowd. Door opens. I get pulled in on a wave of people. And as I get in, I pull my beanie off my face, and instant relief from being out of the gas and being out from being crushed with people. And I turn around and I see an officer plugging the door, not letting anybody else in. And I didn't even think, I just acted, and I went, grabbed him by the vest and pulled him down, pulled him out of the doorway. He lets go, falls to the ground. And, I immediately go to help him up and be like, I was like, I'm sorry, dude. And he's like, don't touch me. And throw my hands up, and this is all on video, what I mean? So I say all that, that's the moment that's federal assault, and by legal definition, that's federal assault. I don't, whether you agree with that or not, it's not really the point, but that's what made it as serious as it did, And so he leaves, 2 officers come in, they close the door, and I'm yelling, I'm angry, and I'm telling them, like, these people here are not here to do anything crazy. These people are like, we were out there protesting. We were led up to the front of the building, tear gas, things got crazy, and they're just, we're just doing our job. And that set me off. I'm like, how many people have done terrible things in history in the name of doing my job. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so all that to say, that stuff, there's articles, there's videos, there's everything on that. And I talked extensively about that on Andrew McLean's podcast. And you can definitely go and hear all the more detailed story. But long story short, that was the main altercation that we wrap up things that day. I get back to my buddy's house. The very next day, I receive a phone call from a close friend whose wedding I had stood in a couple months before. And he asked me point blank, did you go in? And I was like, yeah, man, I went in. Like, it was crazy, and he hangs up the phone and calls the FBI and turns me in, And so I would have never thought, speaking to him, that I'm talking to somebody who's going to turn me into the feds, And so he turns me in, and a few months later I get, I didn't know that he did it at the time, of course. I find out like 6 months later that it was him through his brother. But he had called me, we had that conversation, and then I get a phone call from the FBI around March of 2021 that was just like, my name's Officer so-and-so, and I've got a few questions for you. And if you want to meet and grab a cup of coffee, we can talk about where you were on January 6th. And I was like, hey, like, all due respect, I need to get a lawyer. And he's like, well, that's not really necessary. And I was like, it's really necessary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so got a lawyer, and then totally went dark for a year and 8 months.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get any more phone calls. Me and my family really believed that God had just put a hedge of protection over me, and of course we still believe that, but it was just like, we kind of thought this was all behind us.
Yeah.
In that time frame, I had been seeing someone, I get engaged, we're moving forward. My life's just moving forward as normal. I'd gotten a job in Mobile, all this stuff. And then one morning I just get woken up to police sirens and PA systems going off. This is the FBI, and we've got a Kaleb Dillard, come out with your hands up. And
where is this?
This is at my parents' house. I was living with my parents while I was finishing school.
It's in Birmingham, or where is it?
This is Columbiana.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they brought the whole pony show. I mean, it was armored vehicles, like 30 agents. They come point assault rifles at my mom and my dad and me, and I get thrown in one car. They cuff my dad, put him and my mom in another car, and they go through our house for like 5 hours. I mean, it was just took a really long time looking for the clothes I was wearing that day. And
you just asked.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, we literally, and I said that. So, and again, it's like, it's one thing to do that to me, but it was like to do that to my mom and to my dad, particularly to put him in handcuffs. It was just so unnecessary. We had told my lawyer that I was fully cooperative. I kind of felt dumb afterwards because I was like, they found the clothes. I mean, it was like, yep, here's the beanie, and yep, here's the jacket, and all this stuff. Because I'm like, I didn't try to ditch that stuff. In my mind, I'm not like, I've done something terrible and I need to hide this. And so they find everything, and then on the way getting moved from my house to downtown, I was like, guys, this just was very unnecessary, or it feels unnecessary, because I know my lawyer told y'all I would turn myself in, and one of the lead agents was like, I'm gonna be honest, like, I've been fighting that battle for about a month now, and this was just how it had to go down, and
I had to make a spectacle.
Yeah, right,
Did they shoot your dogs?
They did not. Hey, I'm not gonna lie, I was worried about that.
Yeah, of course you should be.
Yeah, I mean, my parents have 2 dogs.
It's a hobby.
Yeah,
Hobby of the federal law enforcement agency.
Yeah, right. And we have Ring cameras all through the house. We've got videos of them pulling our Ring cameras off and pulling the batteries out, and just things that you're like, oh man. And there was a shot with our dog in the kitchen, and I mean, they didn't do anything to our dogs, but it was like he was jumping up, just being cute because he just loves people. I mean, they really are bad guard dogs. It's like these dudes are coming in our house with guns, and you're not even barking at them. They're like, play, you know what I mean? But he just pet the dog, and I was like, man, thank goodness. But I mean, they told me that was just how it had to go down, and so I go and get held downtown for a couple hours, get booked and everything, and then that day I'm let out on a $5,000 no collateral bond, and I'm back to just living my life, and with restrictions, of course. Yeah. But it's just a very odd thing. I was like, man, if you saw me this morning, you would have thought I was Osama bin Laden. Yeah. And now I'm like
$5,000 bond.
Yeah, right. I mean, and I texted my buddies. I got 2 buddies who are good friends of mine who are cops, and I was like, what's this like? Like, is this a lot? And they were like, dude, we both took bets when we heard you got arrested, and we were like, $100,000 minimum.
Yeah.
Like we thought was going to be your bond. So all that, I don't know anything about legal stuff. All that to say, I just was like, it felt really weird, because I'm like, that seemed like a lot of stuff for me to now I start school next week, you know, and that's what I did. Like I started my last semester of Samford the very next week, and it was just, the weirdest feeling.
Did you ever get so the guy tells you, he said, I had to be this way. Mm-hmm. Where did you get a sense, did anyone ever tell you why they came after you that hard and made a spectacle? Like, what did you ever get any more information about how and why? Because again, the truth is in the bail, okay, or the bond, whatever you want to call it, $5,000. That's the threat you actually pose, is about $5,000.
Yeah,
right. Okay. That's your threat to society, and that's your escape risk. Like that's what they're saying. Okay. When they give you set your bond, this is how much of a threat you are to society, and this is how much of an escape risk you are. That's kind of the combo there.
I see.
And you were $5,000.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Typically, that would warrant someone knocking on your door and being like, "Hey, not tanks, armored cars, kicking in doors, ripping off Ring cameras, SWAT gear." Right. That what you experienced is disproportionate to what they actually said when they set your bond.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I can't speak to why. I was listening to Andrew Clavin, like probably 9 months later, interview an FBI whistleblower that had quit the bureau because of the Jan 6 stuff. And he mentioned, and it was just one of those kind of odd coincidences, because he had mentioned in August of 2022, word coming down like, hey, we got to crack down on this Jan 6 stuff. That's the only reference I have of somebody in the FBI that might, speak to, because it was just that same month, at the end of that month, all of a sudden it's just, and it was just weird to go from, again, like, because I would call my lawyer to be like, check in. Hey, is there any like update on this or whatever? He's like, I haven't heard anything, and he was so shocked. Like, he didn't know that they were coming for me the day that I got picked up. They had to call him. He was in court, and he had to come downtown to speak and stuff. And so it was very, very odd,
So what I hear you saying too is, had they called your attorney and said, Mr. Dillard needs to turn himself in, you would have done it.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no running.
Yeah.
It's like it's people ask me like, would you run, or hey, if you get this much time, you should run. I'm like, any amount of time I get, if I run, it's my life. Yeah. I'm like that's not an option.
Yeah.
I've been so blessed. And I mean, you mentioned that a little bit at the top. I mean, just my family, my parents, I owe so much to them. They've been the most incredible parents to me. And just the environment that I grew up in, I truly wish everybody in this country would get to live a life as privileged as I've had. And that word's become so over, maybe like it's been turned into something negative, but it really is just an honor and a privilege.
God's blessings is what that means. It's literally and then this is derailing the subject matter, but we'll cover it.
Yeah.
Literally, Marxists have turned generational covenant blessings from the king, right? Like, of God. Like, that's called white privilege now. But anyway, I digress.
Right. Yes.
And so
yes.
you had
yeah.
Christian family blessings and went to a Christian school and you were blessed. Okay.
Yes.
Clarify.
Right. And I just wouldn't, it's kind of like this whole idea of going on the run is, I understand people who might have a temptation who live this life of crime. I met several guys in Yazoo City that it's like, who would say, I wish I'd ran or this is to my life now.
Yeah.
And it was a trade-off between that, and I'm not on that boat,
I was a fugitive, like one of the most wanted fugitives in Colorado Springs for, I guess, a whole 6 weeks on the, on the lam. I really showed them.
Hey, no, yeah.
And I was so relieved when I got caught.
I was about to ask you that.
I was so relieved. Yeah. I was like, whew. Yeah. Now I can get this behind me. And I didn't know if I was going to ever get out of prison again, right? And you were kind of facing the same thing. So that's interesting. So, okay, I want to get to the point when you go to prison, and then I want to back up kind of Forrest Gump style on the park bench where it's like, back and forth, and we're going to bring her in. Yeah, okay. And
absolutely.
so they let you out on a $5,000 bond after, raiding you with the full force of the federal government. They let you out on a $5,000 bond. And then how long is it until you're sentenced and you go to prison? Tell us about that. Kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. So a year and a half. A year and a month before I get sentenced, and then a year and 2 months before I actually end up going, or a year and 3 or 4. It's over a year. Yeah. So the process is super drug out. I mean, I get that the initial arrest, I'm back. Then my first week of school, I had to go meet my magistrate judge, have an initial hearing. It's all through Zoom. He kind of tells us how things are going to go. It was me on a call with 4 other dudes, one whom I reunited with at the halfway house. It was just a 2-year kind of thing. But and so I'm back in school. And this cycle happened until I finally got indicted. It was like they would say, okay, we're gonna have a status hearing in November. And then November would come around, and the day before they'd be like, it got pushed 2 months, so it's gonna be January. And then the day before it'd be like, it got pushed 2 months. And so I would keep getting these, and in my mind it was like a blessing. Because I felt like the further away from the incident, just the better, it was going to be.
Sure.
But then also it was frustrating because it was just this cloud of like not being able to plan anything in your life and not knowing. I mean, so in that time, we were going to step back, but a year goes by. I get sentenced in November of 2023, and then in January of 2024 is when I finally go to Yazoo City.
Okay, so backing up now, Forrest Gump style, in this time period of, I guess you tell me, you tell me where Anna comes into the situation. Yeah, so how that happened.
No, I mean, I'll kind of just go step by step. I mean, after getting arrested, being in my last semester, I'm praying that I get to finish school. I don't get the job anymore, and that I had gotten in Mobile. I wasn't moving to Mobile anymore, and so I had no job. The girl I had been engaged to was like, she told me, you're going to prison for a long time. Your life's over, essentially just as like, I'm done, I'm out. And so, I got nobody. I'm like, not nobody, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just no relationship, no job. I'm finishing school. A good friend of mine from the military tells me, I have talked to my boss and told him a little bit about your story and I might have a job for you, and I was like, dude, I'll take anything I can get right now, sure. And so, praise the Lord, this man, he's been so good to me. He hired me when he didn't know when I was going to go, and he didn't know how long I was going to be gone for.
Yeah.
And so I get a job. I start that job in January, and I officially get indicted, and I meet my judge in March of 2023. And the day I meet my judge is the same day I met Anna. And so, we had crossed paths in the past before, but really officially met her.
Sure.
And I got a call from the mutual friend that set us up that morning. I'm getting ready to go meet my judge in this Zoom hearing, and I get a call from her while I was in the waiting room, and she's like, hey, I know you're coming to the fundraiser tonight. You're sitting at our table, and you're sitting next to my friend Anna, and she's single, and you're single, and I just want to let you know. And I was like, hey, that's awesome. I got to go meet my judge, but I will see you tonight. You know what I mean? And I hang up the phone, and sure enough, we sit by each other at this fundraiser, and we talk and had a really, really, really great night. And I didn't get her number because I was like, I wasn't in high spirits. I met my judge. She's a young African-American woman.
That usually means good things for white Christian men.
Yeah,
I don't know if you
right.
knew that. Usually that goes really well for us.
Right. Appointed by Biden in 2021. It was like,
keeps getting better.
Yes. So I was like, I am done. And I was not in good spirits. But I do want to say that Judge Cobb was really, really fair to
That's
me,
awesome.
and I appreciate her a lot. And so, but that night, of course, I'm just taking the things I see on paper, and I'm like, oh boy, and so I don't go to this fundraiser in the high spirits, and I meet Anna, and we had this great night, and she's finishing a residency to do surgical implants and dentistry, and she's doing all these cool things, and I was like, that's so cool. I changed the batteries on smoke detectors at one of our buildings today, so we're kind of the same.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And so, right. And so we, I follow her on Instagram that night. But I didn't get her number or anything, and I didn't.
And
feel
I was
like
really sad about that.
Yeah. And so she, slides into my DMs a couple weeks later, and I had posted this thirst trap, and that's what got. No, I'm just kidding. I posted this story on Instagram. She responded, and I just was like,
it was not a thirst trap.
It was not a thirst trap.
Need to clarify.
Right. And so we started talking, and we kind of arranged to have a date. But I was like, I probably need to let her know what's going on in my life before we have this date.
Gotta tell her about the felonies.
Yeah, right.
Gotta tell her about the felonies.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yes, right. I mean, you know all too well.
I get it.
Yeah. And so we have dinner, and like a week before we're supposed to go on this date, and I was like, do you have any idea what's going on in my life right now? And she was like, shook her head, and so I just told her everything, I'm like, well, this is what happened, and this is what's going on, and right now I haven't been given a plea deal, but they gave me a verbal plea deal, and it wasn't really that great. It was looking like somewhere between 2.5 to 8 years, and so I really don't know what to expect, and she still decided to go ride horses, So yeah, we still had our date and kind of started dating. And you jump in here anytime you want, but basically a couple weeks into going out, I still hadn't gotten this plea deal, but I was a couple weeks from getting it, and I just told her, I was like, you've got all this upward trajectory in your life. You're getting ready to finish this thing that you've been working at for 6 years. Well, I mean, including undergrad for 8 to 9 years, and you're going to be very successful. And I just was like, I just don't think you should date me. I don't know what this is going to look like. And
good advice.
Right. And she just said, I'm not going anywhere. And so I was sold at that moment.
Yeah.
And because I even said, what if it's 5 years? And she's like, it's not going to be. I just have faith that it's not going to be. And I was like, okay. So I do finally, a couple weeks later, get that plea deal. And it was such a blessing. I mean, it was 12 to 18 months, and we both felt like that was doable. It was better than what we thought it was going to be. And I didn't think it was going to get any better than that. I mean, how my lawyer explained it was just like, look, you can get 12 months for every misdemeanor that you have. And they're trying to push like 13 charges on me. It's just crazy how the feds do that and stack these things up. And so it was like, even if you were to go before a jury, which is a 100% conviction rate right now for all Jan 6ers. But a lot of people were opting to not do a trial by jury, but to do it just before a judge. And there was like a 98% conviction rate. So you're like, wow. But people were able to beat some felonies doing that, because the felony charges were just absurd.
Sure.
And so, but it was like, even in that case, let's just say you beat this felony, just 2 of these misdemeanors could be longer than this plea deal, And so it made the most sense for me to accept the plea deal.
Well, and what I didn't know about your story going into this, since you and I met, and at some point I may pull out the text message between you and I before you went to prison. I think that might be worth sharing. Because interestingly, you and I met at an Eagle Forum event
Yeah.
We all met at fundraisers. I
Yeah,
was at a
that's
fundraiser.
right.
and met him.
Right.
You
The
met him at
best
a
kind of
fundraiser,
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out fundraiser.
Yeah. So, but you were introduced to me, shared a little bit of your story. You couldn't come on. Your attorney basically said podcasting's not what you need to be doing right now because
Yeah,
you were
right.
plea bargain.
Right.
But I shared my story with you or talked to you a little bit about like, well, hey, I can tell you whatever. So anyway, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I want to back up and I want to hear your story, Anna. So where were you born? Tell me about your parents. Just real brief.
Columbia, Tennessee. So
Okay.
Middle Tennessee. Lived there my whole life.
Yeah.
And came to Birmingham, attended Samford, and from Samford went to dental school in Memphis. So did my 4 years there. And while I was there, I learned about a residency program that was here. It's in Bessemer, actually.
Yeah.
The Foundry. And so I was like, I have to get back to that.
Okay.
And I'd loved my time at Samford, and I knew I kind of would return.
Yeah.
So I did.
Yeah.
And during that time was when I met Kaleb. So transferred to Alabama.
So so you meet him, you're just thinking, here's this dreamy guy, and I wish he would have got my number.
Yeah.
Doesn't. You fall for the thirst trap. You hit him up and slide into his DMs.
Yes.
This all happens. And then he comes and tells you about his felonies, and his, his potential, trip to federal prison. Again, obviously, he's thinking you're going to run for the hills. He's already been dumped once by a woman for this, right? It sounds like. This is an interesting question, and I can't wait for you to meet my wife to see what weird similarities you guys have because of your decision to do this.
Yeah.
Why, who in their right mind, and this is what everyone asks my wife, why, what, and it's not even about being in the right mind, what possessed you quite literally to say, because he didn't know it was going to be 12 to 18 months. It could have been 20 years, right? Like, it was, potentially, and then the plea bargain was maybe 12. What? Just tell me about that. Tell me about what you were thinking, what you were feeling, what you were praying.
Yeah.
To make you think I'm in for the long haul.
Yeah. I mean, it was purely the peace of the Lord, and I always tell people, and people that know me and have grown up around me and with me know that I am not a peaceful person. Like, I worry about everything. I'm super type A.
Yeah.
And so to meet somebody that has such a unknown trajectory and no way to plan for anything, it was just like, this is not Anna's person. Like, there's no way.
Yeah.
But in that moment of him telling me everything, I just had such a peace, and that was so profound and just overwhelming that I was like, okay, like, I clearly feel the Lord, hear the Lord saying, like, this is going to be your husband. Like, this is not for nothing, and you've tried to control everything. You can't control this, but you can have faith that you're going to marry him, and it was just unexplainable.
That's incredible.
So that was, the easiest decision.
Type A personality who's probably spent your whole life getting to the point where you'd gotten sacrificed, worked your tail off to be what you are, and then now you're connecting yourself to someone who's not going on that trajectory.
Yeah.
I think that's incredible. And it really can only be God that tells a healthy woman to do that, and then them. I don't know. And so again, I guess most people listening to this know my story. Mm-hmm. Some people won't, and so brief version of that. Mine was.
Can I say to your story, because your story was so inspiring to me and gave me a lot of peace and hope, because coming out through what I had endured after the arrest, my life was just felt like total chaos, and it was just so uncertain. And then when I listened to the amount of time you were given, and the fact that you met your wife through time in prison, and now you've got 7 kids, and you've started this business, and you've learned these skills in prison. It was literally like, man, shame on me for not believing that the Lord can be bigger than what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And that gave me a lot of hope and a lot of drive, because it had a lot of people that were just like, how do you deal with the weight of this? And I was like, honestly, it's one of those things that's so big, it forces you have to have faith, or else you're just going to be crushed by it.
Yeah.
And you have to believe that God's bigger than the United States versus Kaleb Dillard, you know? And if you don't believe that, then you're just going to be depressed and spiral. And hearing your story, it was like, I felt God pricking me like, you didn't think I could do this.
Yeah.
And it was, man, so thank you for sharing that and having that story. And
It's so inspiring.
it really is. It really is.
If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be BRYAN, Brian.Dawson, DAWSON at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. It was a blessing to me to know, that you had heard my story and that kind of going in and for us to all be, huddled up now, kind of looking at it, looking at film at this point, right? We're looking at game film. But and just the sometimes you can see the way that God acts and behaves, or the way he does things, and specifically the way that he moves, and you can sense patterns and you can hear things that are similar in testimonies. And some of it's just so specific that this can only be the Lord. It's an evidence. So I'll give you an example. My dad's an atheist. And it's like, well, your son went to prison and got out, and he's, running a multi-million-dollar nonprofit and hangs out with United States senators and everything. He's like, yeah, it's because you finally started doing what I told you. I'm like, okay. I said, what about Christina? That's my wife. And he's like, I still can't explain that. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. So explain that. And so Christina, I still had 10 years left on my sentence when we connected through. And so we grew up together, but she hadn't talked to her in 10 years. She finds me, we start writing. She had recently just went through a divorce, had a son, and we start writing, and we kind of fall in love through written correspondence, got reacquainted through written letters. Yeah. And I told her kind of how I felt, which she, and she wrote back and said, I feel the exact same way. Whether you get out in 10 days or 10 years, I'm going to be here waiting for you because I know God wants me to be with you. Yeah. And so hearing what you just said, and we've not had this discussion. This is the first time I heard that. I'm blown away by that similarity of God literally said, nope, this is the guy you're going to be with, and write it out. Don't worry, I'm going to take care of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man. I mean, as it was happening, because I listened to your story that fall, and as it was happening, and even just leaving that night of her being like, I'm not going anywhere, I was like, God, I don't deserve this. I'm like, I trusted you were going to do something, and I didn't know that it would be this quick. Yeah. And because I didn't know the amount of time was going to go away. And I was like, hey, maybe it's going to be just like Brian Dawson, and maybe I'm going to have 10 years, and maybe year 5, I'm going to meet this person, and I have to be okay with that, because who am I to say that I don't deserve that too? And then to be able to go in, I mean, I remember standing before my judge to accept the plea deal with her as my wife in DC, and it was like, I never imagined I could be here. This is less than a year, and to be standing
Kleenex.
To be standing here with my wife now, and my mom and dad, and the job that I'd been given, it was like God I'm just so blessed beyond anything I could deserve, and I'm so humbled, really, really, and I'm thankful to get to tell the story, and that's really why we want to tell this story, because God's just so good.
And your story, so I typically try and keep podcasts to 40 minutes to an hour, and I'm just going to let my producer know, Adrian, we're going to go longer than that today, because I just think there's no way we can get to all of it. Yeah. You have to tell that beginning portion that we just covered so that people understand the context. But what I am just infinitely interested, extremely inquisitive about you guys going through prison together. Yeah. Right. And again, I have a reason for being interested because of my experience. But I just think it's incredible, and it shows God's hand and everything else. And the prison I went to in Colorado was very by the book. Everything was done. It was very predictable. You went to a federal prison. You went to Yazoo City?
Yazoo City, Mississippi. The zoo. Yeah. So talk about that. And we're just going to have to, you guys going back and forth, because I want to hear what your perspective, and then your perspective, and then your perspective, and then your perspective, as we kind of go through chunks of it. And so, you take the plea deal, you eventually get, you're sentenced, they ship you off, you're off to prison now. You didn't even know where you were going. You basically turn yourself in, and you don't even know where you're going. Yes. You have no idea where he's going.
Not till the second week of January, and He left January 24th.
Okay.
Yeah. So I get sentenced. And again, just to say how dangerous of a person I am, I take my plea deal. I'm allowed the same rules, to be out on bond, because when I took the plea deal, they could have pushed, okay, you've just admitted to a violent crime.
Yeah.
We're going to detain you awaiting sentencing. No, which was a blessing.
Yeah.
But it's all kind of doesn't make sense because how are both of these things true at the same time? You're a domestic terrorist, but also you can go home and go back to work and just don't leave the Northern District of Alabama without telling us. And
if you tell us, then you can go do whatever you want. But you're super dangerous and a domestic terrorist.
Yes, exactly. So then I get sentenced, and even the time between sentencing to turning myself into prison, same exact thing. And so I get sentenced. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know when I'm going. But praise the Lord, I got to be with my family for the holidays, and I got to stand in my cousin's wedding, and I get a call about midway through January that's like, you got to report to Yazoo City, Mississippi on January 24th. And so I found out where I'm going, but it was just government work at its finest. Everything's disorganized.
Sure.
And of course, even in that interim waiting to know when I'm going and where I'm going was stressful for my job, of course. It's hard, like, hey, I need to know when I'm going to be down an employee, so it'd be nice if we, get a heads up. I'd like to plan some things. And so we finally do find out, and I go, but a phone call that I received was telling me I was going to a camp. An email that I received said I'd be at the low. A warden that I had spoken to said, you're for sure going to the camp, but the whole time we're not sure. I just know I got to report to Yazoo City. Now at Yazoo City, they have everything from a penitentiary to a low. It's like all, it's a massive complex.
Yeah.
And so I don't know which one I'm going to. I'm going to be at the low or the camp. But the difference between a camp and a low was the difference between 98 inmates and 1,500 inmates.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's a big difference,
Sure.
a different experience.
And just the level of threat to your life, the two can convey. And so I know, again, from my experience in prison, low literally meant low. In federal prison, low doesn't mean low. Camp means low.
Yeah.
Low is just lower than a USP, right? Which is United States Penitentiary. And so you're still in there with killers who have drugs and have, will stab you and, the works, right? And that's usually you don't get stabbed at a camp, but at a low, this can happen. And so I just want to paint that picture. And you said that basically every J6er was not like that. It was almost like written into it. It's like if you're a J6er, you're not going to a camp. You're going to go be in a real threat.
Yes, yeah. So they apparently put on you, and I know I had one on me because it affected some of the stuff in my halfway house too. They put a public safety factor on you, and just to put it in perspective, I asked my because I went to this class, before I got out that everybody has to go to. That's like reentry orientation, which is a total joke. It's a PowerPoint that the people teaching don't even know the answers to any of the questions anybody has. But they were like, in there, they said, if you have a public safety factor on you, it can determine whether or not you get home confinement while you're at your halfway house. And so I was like, okay, well, I had heard that J6ers have public safety factors on it. I might need to ask my case manager. And I was like, I asked my case manager, do I have a public safety factor on me? She comes later that day and she goes, yeah, Dillard, you have the most severe one you can have.
So I want to pause and just show something here. And again, so pattern recognition here.
Yeah.
Your actual threat level is, again, shown by your bond, shown by the fact that after you were sentenced, you were sent home to spend the holidays with your family.
Yeah.
So they're telling you how much of a threat you really are by all of these things, but then they're punishing you with raiding your house with armored vehicles, ripping your Ring cameras off and going through your house for 5 hours and essentially seizing your parents and putting them in handcuffs.
Yeah.
So that's a punishment.
Right.
That's outside of an actual punishment that you got sentenced to. So you experience that punishment, and now you're in prison. You should be in a camp, but instead of going to a camp, you're going to be sent to a place where you could get stabbed to death. And then, by the way, we're going to put this jacket on your file that has any of the people making the decision in federal prison thinking that you're actually an extreme security threat, even though we let you go home for Christmas and gave you a $5,000 bond, right?
Exactly.
And so I just want to paint
here.
And you drove yourself here,
right?
So that to me just shows you the weaponized parts of this system. Again, if the way that it's set up is that, okay, you committed a crime. here's the actual punishment is you get sentenced to this much time in prison.
Right.
That's how it's supposed to work. Using these other elements of the system is basically it's retaliatory and it's not just, in my opinion.
Correct. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, it just doesn't correspond with how are both of these things true at the same time. And that is certainly because I'm such a law and order justice guy, and there are two things that can be true at once, and that there are some people that we treat way too lightly with crimes that they do, and then there are other people who you're like, and that's why when it becomes this political game. Mm-hmm. And so that's all we're saying, because you don't want to like, man, I there's a lot of drug use where I was, and drugs are scary, know, and I'd never been in any environment where there was a lot of drug use, but I saw how it destroys people's lives and how dangerous substance abuse is. But it's like at the same time, when you create this environment and you throw people in a cage for 20 years with so much infrastructure that allows drug use while you're in it, it's like, how is that, inappropriate? Just so I can say this crime that was committed is really bad and it needs to be punished severely. But then I can also say the system that punishes this crime is doing really poor work and needs to be fixed,
My point is, and again, I'll just state very emphatically, I'm not one of those, felons who's like a real criminal justice reform guy that I think we should let everybody out of prison. I actually think we should be killing more people. Pedophiles should be killed. People who, anyway.
Yeah.
So I believe that there's a place for justice, but I believe if it's the Department of Corrections, I think they should function towards that end. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If it was Department to throw them in prison and let them rot to death, then that would be the end, but it says correction. Yeah. And so, okay, maybe, anyway, but I completely agree. And we'll come back and do a whole nother episode on the dysfunction of the actual system in Alabama is way worse than the feds, and it's way worse than Colorado. Yeah. But the feds is worse than Colorado. Yeah. So I had it very good.
Yeah. And I do want to, so one thing you spoke to, because I don't want people to get too much of a false picture, where I was, a low and a medium was a very big jump as well, because in a low, everybody is going home. So we didn't have any lifers at Yazoo City. And that does make a big difference as far as stabbings. Yeah. So where there might be people who had a lot of tools they could use to stab, I was at a place that was not violent for the most part. Sure. Because
there was hope.
It was, because it was a big jump. It was like, do I want to risk getting bumped to the medium because I commit this act of violence? Yeah. And so one thing that we did, we were blessed when we got there, and Anna can speak more because she was very worried, and it was hard for me to comfort her, especially seeing where I was and knowing the amount of inmates, but to try and say, honey, actually, it's not as dangerous as you think here. It's like, you're just lying to me. It's like, no, I promise you, it's people, it's a big deal. If they get caught fighting and they get a chance that they're going to get thrown to a medium, it's like, that's a big jump, And so I was thankful, even though I was with 1,500 people and so many things that I can speak to that were not right and not good. It was like I was not at this place with a lot of violence, and so thankful for that.
Yeah, yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
So you're in prison. How long before you were able to visit him?
Yeah, it was like 3.5 weeks.
3.5 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, so
which sounds short, but in the scheme of things, it was
awful,
horrible.
And you didn't know how long it was going to be.
I'm laughing so I don't cry right now. Yeah, no. So, and that was part of the just starting off on the right foot with Yazoo City was how long it took for my visitation form to get approved. Yeah. Typically, I feel like guys had told you at other locations it had been like a week, 2 weeks at the max.
Right. Yeah.
Like very quickly, very efficient.
Yeah.
I ended up having to physically drive my form to Jackson, Mississippi, because that's where their mail came from, because they lost the 2 other forms that had been overnighted and mailed in the normal mail. So it was just, like everything.
We rejected one of them.
And then other just never
it was like
manifested.
My counselor's telling me, oh yeah, your family can go on and submit this form, and if they find it online, great, they can mail it in. And then when it gets in, she's like, oh, sorry, my superior doesn't allow them to be done this way, so you're going to have to start the process over and mail this form to them. And mail takes, one of the things about your story that was so, you sent out that letter to your wife saying, this is how I feel about you, and you had to wait 2 weeks to
Yeah.
get a response letter. You're like, oh God, it's
Snail mail.
Yeah, right.
In a day of texting and emailing,
Yeah.
you don't really
Brutal.
understand it. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Anna, what was your when you were able to come visit him? What did you think as you drove up to the prison and you went in, and I assume you had to be patted down and just short of being strip searched essentially?
It was a process.
Yeah.
Tell them about your first visit.
Tell us that.
Yeah. So his mom went with me.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law is the best mother-in-law in the
Yeah.
world, but she wasn't approved, but she was like, I don't want you to go by yourself.
Yeah.
So we drove over the night before and spent the night which every other Saturday past that, I would just get up and drive over early in the morning because it was like a 4-hour drive, so it was doable. Get there, walk in. I will say the guy that was working the front desk that day, and he showed up a little bit toward the end of my time there. He was always kind to me.
Yeah.
And the day that we picked him up, I thanked him. I was like, look, like you're literally the only person that has ever treated any of us in a respectful, kind way.
Sure.
And that doesn't go unnoticed, and we appreciate it. He was there, and so I get there. I had read online, like I'd found on the BOP website, like approved dress, because you have to wear like certain things. Your jeans can't have holes in them. Certain colors you can't wear. Yeah. Like it's a extensive thing. I mean,
Yeah.
And so got there, had read about, or you'd told me about vending machines. There'll be vending machines in the visitation room. Bring some dollar bills. So I had dollar bills. And I'd read that they would have lockers for you to put your keys, your wallet, everything you can't take to the back at the front. Well, there were lockers at the front. They just didn't work anymore. So they wouldn't give me a key. They were like, you can't bring your phone in. You can't bring what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so I had to run those back out to the car to his mom.
Yeah.
And so sit down for a hot second. They call me because they're like, the guy, the nice one, he's like, this is your first time. We want you to just walk through security just to kind of see what happens. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Take your shoes off, kind of like a TSA checkpoint. Shoes off, you walk through this big thing and it goes off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no jewelry on. I said, can I wear my wedding ring? They said, that's fine, but take it off just to see if that's what's dinging.
Yeah.
Did that, dinged. And then a lady walked up who was the guard that worked every Saturday. So she and I became the best of friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was just power trip, every week. And so she walks up and she just screams, you got a bra on? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, can't wear a bra. Take it off, take it off, take it off. And so I'm just like manically trying to take, and I'm just standing there with it. And she goes, we ain't gonna hold your bra for you. And I'm like, well, I'm not leaving, so where's a trash can? And so it was like, I threw my bra away in the lobby of a federal prison that day. But learned, do you have to wear a sports bra?
Yeah.
So you go through the security every week. They would say visitation started at 8.
Yeah.
Did not. We would get there at 8 o'clock, and then we would get called back around 9.
Yeah.
And then he would get, the inmates would get brought in around 9:15. So it was a very late, slow. They'd just stand at the desk. They'd be talking about what they did that weekend,
And of course, she's coming to see me every Saturday, which was beyond kind and incredible. But for some people, they flew from California to visit their family for the 2 times out of the year.
Yeah.
And
they're wasting an hour.
They're gobbling up the time.
Yeah.
They're taking up the time, and also they'll just outright reject people. I mean, I had friends they rejected their, 68-year-old or 78-year-old mother because she was wearing, I think, a tank top or something. It was like, okay, the reason for that rule is because they don't want people to look scandalous.
Yeah.
Okay, this is his 78-year-old mother. There's no common sense that can ever be used. They made a child rejected a guy's child because he was wearing camo, and it was like
a 6-year-old.
Like,
It was pants.
I think it was 4. I mean, it was
he was little,
he's toddler. Like, it was like, what are they? If he's gonna give his dad gonna slowly piece together a camouflage outfit with his t-shirts from his toddler? Like, it's just so
and
stupid.
And to that point, it didn't matter the rule. I could wear one outfit one Saturday, wear the exact same thing the next Saturday, and if it was somebody different working, they'd be like, can't wear that.
Yeah.
So I kept like 4 different outfits in my car because they'd turn me away, and I'd be like, great, I got another shirt. I'm going to go put it on, and that just infuriated them because they could not find a way.
Yeah.
We always laughed because they'd be like, the skinny white bitch is back, and I'm like, I'm here,
We can't stand that girl.
Yeah. So walk through, you go through the initial security, you sign a book, and then you get locked in this room while they stamp your hand and like you show it under black light, and then they open one of the doors, take you to another room, and that was the visitation room. And that's where we spent every Saturday for 6 hours. And it had all these vending machines, and until March or April, so like a month and a half or 2 months, completely empty. Like no drinks, no snacks, nothing.
And we just were like, hey, we're not missing out on this time together. So I
we
just fast for
No sandwiches.
even
nothing.
the water fountain didn't work in there.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not up to code, So
now shift back to Caleb.
Yeah.
So interesting prison story. So we were in the conference room talking a little bit before this, but you ended up in the SHU, which is a special housing unit. But even before all that, just what was it like for you going into prison, being around all these people who are like, I always said, this is terrible. You could tell who the child molesters in prison were because they look normal.
Yeah.
Like
That's
anyone
what
who
you
looked
always
normal
say.
is, is a child molester. And so, you obviously go in there and you look like just a normal person. Now in federal prison, again, there's a lot of normal people, quote unquote, that end up in federal prison. But I'm sure you stuck out like a sore thumb, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah. I tell all my buddies, I'm like, I'm the only white guy at the white dude table without a neck tattoo.
Yeah.
Like, and it was one of those things where, I'll give you the full rundown. You get there, and a lot of people probably don't know this. I certainly didn't know this, but it was like, someone from your race is going to come to you and be like, what are you in for? And so that happened to me. And my first night, and of course, there's a lot of cell phones at Gaza City, so they could just check and make sure you're telling them. Because I guess in some prisons you have to bring your paperwork. And funny enough,
for me,
right. So funny enough, my attorney had sent me with my paperwork because he's just an outstanding guy, and so I had the physical
drill. Yeah,
I had the physical copy, but. They were able to check up on me, and basically they confirmed that you're clean. You're not a sex offender. You're not a rat or whatever. And so they immediately are like, all right, man, and they take care of me. Because when I got there, they strip you down, they search you, they give you your new clothes. I was given, none of my clothes fit. I was given 2 left foot shoes that were size 9s. I wear 11.5. So I was like sliding into them with the back lip folded down. And they hand me bedding and a dish towel, and they're like, you live in that one. And they point across this massive courtyard to this center building where that's going to be my home, for the next 8 months or 10. I thought 10 months, but I didn't know about good time and First Step Act and all that stuff. So I walk across this courtyard, I get up into the unit, and she gives me, my counselor gives me a cellmate, guy comes. I don't have anything, and once they confirm my paperwork's good, then they start just bringing me, food and clothes and a towel and soap and toothbrushes and things. And these aren't like, trade expecting anything in return. This is like your boy's taking care of you, you know. And so they walk me in the TV room that night, and they're like, you can set your chair here, and these are the white TVs, and those are the black TVs, and those are the Hispanic TVs, and we'll show you where you can sit at the chow hall, and this is the white table, and all this other stuff, and so they integrate you, and it was this overwhelming response because where I was 95% drug dealers. Everybody was there on a drug crime, and so when I came in and it was like, oh, what are you in for? I'm like, I'm a Jan 6er. They're like, we got a Jan 6er, boys, and everybody's coming and asking me, and everybody, thank the Lord, but it was like everybody in prison has a bone to pick with federal government. So, I can't tell you how many people came to me and they're like, man, we were cheering you on that day, and stuff. And I say all that to say, it worked to my favor that people weren't in there like, you're a terrorist and we can't stand you. All of them are.
How dare you storm the Capitol, sir?
Yeah, right. And even it's so crazy, even like the race card that they try to pin, that the media tries to sew pin on Trump supporters, like, like that just didn't play at Yazoo City. You know, there were not people that I was so worried about. I was worried they're going to find out. You know, at first I was cautious because I didn't know what it was like.
Yeah.
But as I got in there and was there for a lot longer, it was like, oh, you know, yeah, I'm a Jan 6er. And they're like, oh, my man. You know what I mean? You're just like, wow, okay. I don't know if I'd say that. I mean, at one point I was telling people the story and I was like, yeah. And then I reached out to try to help the guy up. And my cellmate at one point was like, you got to stop telling people you tried to help that guy up. It's like, I was like, that's just the truth. Yeah, right. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so very, very cultural, a big culture shock. You know, I try to hit the ground running to immediately get a job and be productive. And I immediately get a job teaching GED classes. Yeah. And because I also...
That was my first job in prison too.
Really? Yeah. Wow.
Dang.
Yeah. I mean, and that was a blessing. It gave me a place to be able to write and read and have a desk and allowed me to connect to a lot of inmates. Honestly, it allowed me to, because they force inmates to be in those classes, and not a lot of them care at all to get their GED, and it's not my job to get you your GED either. Like the teacher, the people who, I mean, this is a big. I was hired as a tutor, and I'm supposed to be posted in the library. And when guys go to their classes to be taught by their teachers, and they have extra questions, they can go to the tutors. That's supposed to be your job. And I made a whopping $18 a month doing it. Yeah. Not to say that federal inmates should make any money. I'm just saying it's a whole different question, a whole different conversation. But the teachers there don't actually teach. You know, the teachers hire you as a tutor, and then they just get you to teach their class for you. So they're making Lord knows how much every year. Our teacher would brag about making over 6 figures, and you're doing their job for them, you know? And so but it was a blessing to get that job, because it was just like, I had a desk to go to where it was quiet, and because people partied at all hours. I mean, they don't, at Yazoo City, they didn't, you'll be on paper as having a job, like you'll be a compound scrubber, but you can be in the unit and in your bed all day, you know? And so we had a lot of people that you mentioned, like, from this time to this time, you can slam cards and dominoes, and then it's quiet hours. And like, honestly, we got none of that. I mean, people would routinely be up all night, be loud. I had to sleep with earphones, and I mean, I had to sleep with earplugs because there was no structure given at the prison.
And see, what was interesting about my stay, and we were talking about this in the conference room beforehand, there was like a self-governance built into the prison system. It was basically like, if you were playing dominoes or cards outside of, from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., you were allowed to make noise, yell at the football game on the TVs in the day room or whatever. Yeah. But after 10 p.m., if you were doing that, you would get dragged into the bathroom and stomped out or stabbed. Yeah. Right. And so it was it wasn't the COs, the correctional officers, that were enforcing this. It was, and I said, if someone peed on the toilet seat and they didn't wipe up the pee off the toilet seat, you were going to get dragged in, beat up, or stabbed. And on and on. And so, if so there's this kind of weird honor among thieves type of a situation where, if you didn't hold the door open for someone, right, and you let the door slam in someone's face, or didn't apologize if you did that, right, watch out, right? And so it was really weird, because people wouldn't expect that in prison. Is like, everyone in here is actually really respectful and kind, and like, there's like a level of diplomacy. But again, I was in there with a lot of guys who were in there for life that didn't, and so anyway, but interesting.
Well, it's funny because I had the same experience of, I've never heard "excuse me" more times in my life than there. And there was higher respect than I would say you get on the streets out here on the outside. But it was considered by the other inmates who had been in other institutions as a very low respect yard. Yeah. As far as the bathrooms were disgusting most of the time. Things were just dirty, and there wasn't a lot of, because there was no structure put in there by the guards. Yeah. And we don't have, lifers were not present. Everybody was going to go home, presumably, from there. And so it did make for this unique experience where I had watched YouTube videos once I found out where I was going on kind of like, and there are a couple of really good channels out there that will give you kind of a breakdown of what to expect. And the thing that was inconsistent from all the videos was how dysfunctional and dirty. I mean, how like people could sleep all day and party all night if they wanted to, you know? And I hated that, because I was so gung ho and got this job that required me to be at the classroom at 8 a.m. And I was having trouble sleeping at night because it sounds like everybody's around me is partying. It was all open living where there were no doors. It was all open. So everything is just like you're living in a concrete cubicle. Yeah. And there's just spaced out. And you've got a wall that's, probably 8 feet tall, but it's like maybe 7 feet. But anyways, everybody's just living in these little boxed out areas, and there's no doors. Everything is just, and people are walking up and down the hallways at all
You
hours
said
of
it sounded
the night.
like a gas station in a food truck.
Yeah, it's
That's the
basically,
best
okay, this is
comparison.
how one of my fellow inmates who, God bless him, incredible guy, good Christian brother that I really connected with, how he described it, and it's so accurate. He's like, it's like putting your cot down, and you know, like the food truck that's really bumping, the taco food truck downtown at like 2 a.m., where it's like everybody's just deciding to eat at this
The
food truck.
mariachi music.
Yeah, with mariachi music and all that craziness, and all the Latinos just screaming in Spanish, and then the gas station that's also popping like at like 12 at night in the ghetto downtown. It's like your cot is right there in between those two establishments from 10 to 2 in the morning. I mean, it's just like, it was just shocking to me because I'm like, oh my gosh, like when are y'all sleeping? I'm like, oh, it's during the day.
Sure.
When I'm teaching. So so that was frustrating.
That's wild.
Know? Yeah. But that job was a blessing, and it was cool to get to connect with so many guys. And I mean, a lot of guys who had no desire to get their GED, and I'm like, that's fine. I can't make you get your GED. I'm actually not even supposed to be teaching this class. Yeah. I'd be like, what do y'all want to talk about? You know, and we talk about philosophy and God, and we would talk about their lives. I had guys that was sharing their stories, and that's why I wanted to ask you, and you answered it, but of just like finally getting picked up and it being such a relief of stress because they've lived this life of crime for so long. Yeah. Just things that I could never relate to, things that I've never experienced. And it was so humbling to meet those people and to be like, wow, I'm so blessed and so beyond grateful for the upbringing that I had and the family that I had. And that's why Christian values are so important, you know, because as I met these people, and, you know, Briarwood is not a perfect school because it's a perfect school. It was a perfect school because the teachers had a relationship with God, you know, and they were imperfect people. And it was a very imperfect school that was surrounded by people who were striving to love the Lord, you know, and that we're never going to create this utopian society. But when you are surrounded by people who have God in their lives and this underlying Christian principle, that's what creates the life that I was allowed to live. This life where I was never felt harmed. I was felt safe, and there was love, and there was joy and enjoyment of all these blessings and all of these things. And I truly believe that's how you turn around a state and a community and things like that. And I think prison just exemplified that it was like, man, because a lot of these guys had plenty of money. And I do want to say that the education system was not what failed them. You know, they didn't have their GEDs. They were successful HVAC guys, successful framers, owned their own businesses, electricians. They did all this handiwork and all these things. And they were making tons and tons of money. But the temptation of selling extra drugs on your job site and making an extra $2,500 in a weekend, you know what I mean? Like that's tempting to anybody. But when you don't have any moral foundation, there's no Christian value, then you're like, how do you expect those people to not go down that road and that path? And so, you know, all that to say, man, it was an eye-opening and humbling experience to just see the life that I've been able to have, and to be thankful that that God being in the center of your life is what's going to change your life.
Amen.
You know, make it better.
Amen.
Yeah.
Tell me about your trip to the special housing unit.
Yeah. Gosh, do you want to say your piece first? I mean, your experience. I mean,
in a roundabout way, it was my fault. I felt like because it prompted it. That's what they chose to use as why. But it was around May initially. And we had been told, hey, you're going to get information on Halfway House. It was the public safety factor waiver that I had been calling multiple places, trying to figure out. I called Yazoo City. For the first 5 months of him being there, no one answered the phone. I would get at work and set my phone, and it would just ring and ring and ring and ring. Like nobody would ever answer it. Yeah. So I couldn't get anything from that. I would look online. My mom would. My mom could be in the FBI. Like that woman can find anything online.
Lori Wall, she's incredible. Yeah.
So she would find like
at 1819.
Oh,
that's
I know.
right.
Gosh,
She
if
could
you need an
find anything.
investigative reporter, I promise you.
She can get to the bottom of it. And so she had found this place in Texas or something, and she was like, this is what it looks like on the BOP website, that you have to call to get them to contact Yazoo City to facilitate the paperwork, just a paper
If
trail.
I can, because we kind of veered off from this, but when I found out that I had a public safety factor, it was like you can submit a form to have that
waiver.
waived.
Yeah.
Because when you get to the halfway house, if you have a public safety factor, you can't go home. You can't get a weekend pass. You can't go. And I was like, man, I want to be able to. I'm going to be 15 minutes from my wife. I'm not going to be able to go see her at all. You know, and so that's why she had started working on getting this paperwork and finding out where we needed to send this waiver. And my attorney was like, well, he'd have a shoe in to get it because we have all this proof of why he doesn't deserve it.
Right.
Yeah.
He was allowed to be home. He was given a $5,000 no collateral bond. There were all these things. And he was like, yeah, I think we can for sure get that waived.
Yeah.
But we need to get this form done. And so she was working on that for me because obviously I don't have access to resources in there and stuff.
And so just making calls and trying to, I worried the mess out of our attorney because it was just like I would find this and I'd be like, well, do you think this is beneficial? Do you think this is helpful? And I told him one day, I was like, I promise I'm a dentist. I have a job. I just also work for the BOP on the weekends and on Fridays when I'm not, pulling teeth. And so ultimately found that there was a dead end on every juncture that we had tried. And so he had needed help with the First Step Act credits being applied to his date. His date wasn't moving. He was qualified for FSA credit through teaching and that kind of stuff. And so the paralegal that is employed by Yazoo City at the resource of the inmates, that's what her job literally is to help them. He had reached out to her and she had quickly resolved that issue. His date started changing. Yeah. She got back to him via the mail and was like, I've looked into it. This is whatever. And so on a phone call that like Thursday night, timeline's important. Thursday night, I'd said, hey, is her name on that letter? Like maybe we can get her contact and have our attorney call her and just get some information. Since she's already worked with you, she knows your case. And he was like, I'll look. So the next morning when he called me, he said, well, it was only her first initial and her last name. So he gave that to me. Well, so my mom and I found it. Yeah. And found her phone number online on Google. It wasn't like mom hacked some sort of database and was like, in the basement. But
here come the tanks and the armored cars.
Exactly.
That's right.
No, my dad's in IT, but not that kind. Yeah. And so she had given me probably 4 different phone numbers. She was like, I found these 4.
Yeah.
And so I texted a screenshot of those to our attorney. And I said, I don't know if these will work, but this is what is online on her LinkedIn, on other public platforms.
Yeah.
And so he called, that's a Friday, and he calls me that Friday afternoon, and he's like, well, I left a voicemail, and then I got a very angry phone call back from her boss an hour later being like, how the hell did you get this phone number? Yeah. And he said, well, I found it online, But then he told me they went on to have a very normal conversation. He had asked him about the public safety factor. Yeah. He had said this is in regards to an inmate at Yazoo City. And our attorney, he talks like he's out of Gone with the Wind, just like the most least intimidating, slow Southern drawl, just very polite. Yeah. And so I know there is no way that he would have come across like aggressive.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
And that being said, that Friday, that's what happened. And then that
the following Tuesday
is when he got taken to the SHU for investigation.
So I just hear my name over the intercom. I literally just sat down with a cup of coffee in my bed and opened up Chronicles of Narnia. And I was like, and I hear my name over the intercom and I'm like, that's weird because I've just never been called to the lieutenant's office. And my cellmate was like, all right, go pee in a cup, and I hadn't been drug tested, since I had gotten there. And I had taken a drug test when I first got arrested, and I have no history of drugs. So like I wasn't having to do that while I was on probation, like awaiting sentencing or anything like that. And so I was just like, okay, well, yeah, I'm sure that's what it is. I can't think. So I get there and I walk into the lieutenant's office. He hands me a piece of paper. He's like, so you're under SIS investigation and you're going to the SHU. And I don't know anything else, and I can't tell you anything else, but that's what's going on. And hands me a sheet of paper that says, under SIS investigation, under the description, it says, under SIS investigation. I'm like, this isn't helpful at all. Yeah. And it just has a little check by a box that says, must be sent to a special housing unit. Yeah. And so no phone call, no way to contact her, let her know what's going on, or anybody in my family. It's just straight up like, I go straight from there. I can't go get any of my stuff, you know what I mean? And so they take you in there and they cuff you, and it's like the real deal prison life at that point. You're in this 55 square foot room with your shower and your toilet and your sink, and you've got a cellmate and a desk, and that's where you are 24 hours of the day, you know? And in 42 days, I went outside twice, you know, for recreation. But then I went, they still allow visits, but only on Mondays for an hour. And we didn't know that for my first 3 weeks in. And then after that, I think we got to do 3 visits, 3 or 4 like that. And so I was let out for those visits. But oh my gosh, it was just insane. It was like, I get in there and I'm like, oh my gosh, like Anna's gonna be worried sick. And thankfully friends of mine were able to let her know through people that she had been in visitation room with and other like family members or whatnot, or friends of mine who had family members who they could call on the wall phone and be like, hey, can you please, can you please let Kaleb's, you know, wife know that he's in the shoe. And so she knows that where I'm at, but for the first 2 weeks, they don't even tell me why I'm in there. And, you know, she's written me and she's like, it's me and I'm so sorry and it's all my fault. And I was like, don't jump to any conclusions.
No, but at that point, in my defense, like we said in the conference room, all their mail gets read. They don't get a physical copy of it. They get like a scan of it. And so I'm giving specifics of like, this is the phone call where we discussed, hey, will you get her first initial and her last name, and this is the phone call where you're like, I got it, and I'm like, okay, I'll give it to our attorney, you know. So it's very cut and dry that they could listen to those recorded phone calls and see Kaleb didn't ever have the number, which is what he was ultimately being investigated for.
Like I'm giving out personal information of an employee who has her personal information on the internet. It's like, I don't know. If anything, this employee should be thanking us because we let her know that, hey, by the way,
it is to
really
find
easy to find your personal phone number.
And how many vehicles she had, like her social media handles, like it was all on there. Nobody's life is private anymore. And so it had been a week and a half or something, and I'd maybe gotten 1 letter, and I kept calling Yazoo City and they would block my phone number because they wouldn't answer it when I called. But when my front desk reception person at the office called, or one of my assistants called on their phone, they picked up. So it was like they recognized my area code because I have the Middle Tennessee area code still. And they're like, 931. Oh yeah, that's that girl. We're not going to answer it. And so ultimately got connected, and we were able to schedule a phone call with our attorney to Kaleb. And so I stood in on that. He didn't know that I was. And that ultimately made me feel better because I felt like he would have told our attorney if anything bad had happened. He would not have told me that. He didn't know I was there. And so he, you know, nothing was said. And he was just like, it sucks, but I'm okay. I still don't know what's going on, you know, because they're allowed.
You're allowed to call your attorney, but I wasn't allowed to call her. You know, I hadn't spoken with her in 18 days by the time they finally rolled the phone around, and the phone minutes all change when you're in the shoe. And so it had just been this really long time of no contact and just, you know, living in this cell. My roommate is still able to get high and do all these things in the shoe. It's just absolutely insane. You know, I'm like, how? You know, and so I'm still living through all this and trying to just figure out. They keep telling me we're going to pull you out and tell you why we got you here. And then a week would go by. Don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you, Dillard. We're going to pull you out tomorrow. We'll let you know what's going on. All right. Week goes by. Hey, we haven't forgotten about you, Dillard. I'm like, well, I just want to know why I'm here. And he's like, well, your people tried to contact the wrong people. I said, what does that even mean? And he's like, well, your wife never should have called. And I was like, my wife never called anybody. And he goes, well, you know, your attorney should have never called that lady on her personal cell phone number. That was out of line for them to do that. And that immediately sets me off because I'm like, what? I was like, my lawyer is trying to call another lawyer to ask a legal question. You know, like, this is not harassment. They're not, and even if my lawyer called her to harass her, I have not done anything. Like, why am I sitting here in the shoe? You know what I mean? Like, and it seems like this investigation's already been completed. And so basically he tells me, you know, the biggest thing he told me was, he's like, well, that lady's got the freedom to put her cell phone number online. You're a fan of freedom, aren't you? You know, which was really just his way of being like, I know what you're in here for, and we're going to drag you as long as we want to drag you. You know, and that's what they did.
One more hit the J6er.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And
Which so many others had been in a similar or way worse situation in DC. And we had been very familiar with that and very fortunate that we hadn't experienced it until, I mean, he came home 2 weeks after he was let out of the SHU. So it was kind of like the final farewell of Yazoo City to be like, we'll punt you in here for 43 days and then you'll go home.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to read this. Do you mind if I read the text messages or text thread?
No,
so,
please.
This is January 11th. I guess that would be this year, right before you went in.
Yeah.
At 9:46 a.m.
Yeah.
Said, hey, Brian, I know it's been a long time, but I finally got my sentencing last November and finally found out where I'm going last week. I'll be heading to Yazoo City, Mississippi, low security prison for 10 months starting January 24th. I just wanted to reach out and say your story has given me a lot of hope over this past year and a half. I'm grateful to have as little time as I do. I've ended up with much better deal than most of the J6ers. And I said, use those 10 months to become a better version of yourself. Think of it as an opportunity, not punishment. You get 10 months to reflect on who you are and what you want to do with your life. Stay in the Word, read the Bible every day, read other good books, biographies of great men, leadership books, exercise. Don't fall into self-pity. Your 10 months will fly by.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's crazy.
And I took those words to heart. I know. Man, it's so awesome. And I did all those things, just so you know, that you mentioned in that text.
Yeah.
And and I did mention, and I want to always mention that, you know, we've just been so blessed. And it was just something that it was a total God thing because so many other Jan 6ers have it way, way worse. And, you know, the message of the story is not, oh my gosh, I've been, you know, I cannot believe that I was so abused. It's really unfortunate because look at what they did and look at the money and the time and the resources that they spent on prosecuting someone like me. I do want people to know that mainly because what a misallocation of funds that is for our government to be spending. But also it was like, man, there are Jan 6ers who, I mean, there was a 72-year-old man that had been given 4 years that I was with in Yazoo City, shipped all the way from Oregon. You know, why did you ship this man across the country?
Yeah.
You're telling just crazy things that have happened to so many people that you know that have been very much more mistreated than me.
Yeah,
and
that was my hope bringing you on is kind of all of the above. What I wanted to, you know, one, we love to tell stories on my podcast. I love hearing stories, and so this is an incredible story. Yeah. And what makes a story good is when you see God do impossible things and show up in a way that only He can.
Yeah.
That's really the biggest thing I wanted to draw to this, but also showing the January 6th nature of how they, you know, I didn't know they showed up to your house and basically tanks and everything. That's crazy. But it, you know, all of the above. And I want to finish kind of, you know, I think maybe finishing the story arc of, you know, you persevered, God was with you.
Yeah.
God grew you through the process. He grew you through the process. He grew you through the process. And then He grew you guys together through the process.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I know what a gift that is with my wife and I, that God put us through that because He was preparing us for what I'm doing now. Right. Yeah. And so I'm watching you guys, you know, observing you guys because I want to see what God's going to do with you. He didn't just give you this really interesting, unique beginning of your marriage for it just to go bleh. And so I know how God does that because of what He's done in my life. And so I'm interested to see what He does with you guys. Kind of on that now, what are you guys up to now? What is your job now and what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm in property management and my company, praise the Lord, saved a job for me and allowed me to go right back to what I was doing before I left.
Awesome.
And it's just been an incredible blessing. So I love what I do. I love who I work for, and I'm committed to them. We're also writing a book, so to get more of the detailed story, because it's such a long story, and it's funny. And Andrew McLean's podcast, it's like an hour and 20 minutes long, and we didn't even touch prison. Yeah, you know, and so
that's why I wanted to go into the prison part.
Yeah, right. I mean,
call me weird with my
right. No, and there's so many facets of it that, again, just to be able to look at it from a Christian, very blessed and privileged perspective of like, oh wow, like this is problematic, because I feel a lot of people who have gone through the DOJ and the federal system don't, you know, have the tools to really effectively articulate the problems that have gone on. But then to really tell the piece of, so we want that to be a part of the book, and of course. the book just seems appropriate with how many details there are and
100%.
how long this covers.
No, it'll be good, and I need to write my book too. I'm always told that, but I think
Absolutely.
that's
You get sentenced to 10 months, you'll have a lot of time to write a book.
Correct. Hopefully I don't. Although, with Trump in, I think I'm safe.
Yes.
So, well, good stuff. And then Anna, how everything going well in the dental world?
It's great. His dad's a dentist, which is another God thing because, it was just like perfect. So I finished up a contract with another employer this summer, and then I moved into his office, and we're expanding and making room for me, and they're incredible and such
Carrying
a
on the
family.
family
And
business.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's really great.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for coming on. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. And I'm excited to read your book and see what God does with you guys, because I know He didn't take you guys through that for nothing. So.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It's great.
Thank you guys.
Appreciate it, Brian.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that'll wrap it up for this week. Great story. We're not going to do an overtime segment. So, man, that was riveting. It's good stuff. I can't wait to go back and watch it and see it again. So, again, go on to YouTube, subscribe to the page. Also, you guys should support us financially. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing that out there. We are a nonprofit. It is the end of the year. There's not a lot of people doing the incredible work that the team that we've been able to put together here at 1819 News, having the impact that we're having on politics, on culture, on the state of Alabama, making it a better place. I've been told by many people in the government, that say that we've single-handedly changed the political trajectory of the state. And we've done that through fearless reporting, telling incredible stories like we did today, and just, engaging in what good news media is supposed to do. We've brought a lot of change, and we'd love for you guys to support the work we're doing, whether it's by becoming a member. Go to 1819news.com, click the button where it says become a member. That's easy. Do that, or if you'd like to make a year-end donation, you can reach out to Linda Baker. That's LINDA .Baker, BAKER, at 1819 News. Email her, and she can help you figure out how to do that. So, all right, well, that wraps it up for this week. Until next time, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.